Hey everybody, Tony D with a screenwriter's rant on Master, a movie about racism that is a horror movie. Anyhow, smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Please check out my books. The links are in the description. Comedy Horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys, books 1 through 8. Little Jones asleep on the couch. We went walkies, so I'm going to leave her alone. But let's get into this. So, trailer's not great. Not a great trailer at all. I'm a little foggy on what this movie is, other than it. The trailer's just all set up, and the setup is there is an old New England school. It's haunted by some evil presence. That's probably racist. There is a black faculty member who's mentoring a black female student, and another black professor who's fighting for her tenure at the school. And then there's the implication of racism, but then there's also this supernatural element that's completely unexplained. And then there's some screaming and a guy in a hood. And that's about it. It's called Master. March 18th in select theaters and Prime Video. Not enough here. Just not enough here. I was forced to dig a little deeper. So here we got the stars: Regina Hall, Zoe Renee, Amber Gray, Ella Hunt, Talia Ryder. Regina Hall, I think she's co-hosting the Oscars, believe it or not. Directed by Mariama Diallo. 3 women tried to survive their experience at a historic New England university. Terrible. That's a terrible synopsis. Is this a horror movie or not? What's the supernatural element? Try to survive. Try to survive what? It doesn't even say the racism part, which is clearly implied in the trailer, but is this just about racism? I dug a little deeper, and I know I don't normally do that, right? But there was so little here, and this is sort of a hot button topic, so I kind of this time wanted to know what I was talking about. I didn't think Elvis would be a hot button topic the time I did the Elvis trailer, but whatever. So I looked up the movie on Wikipedia and Rotten Tomatoes, and I saw some of the reviews, and one of the reviewers said it's too didactic, meaning that it basically lectures you. So, and then the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and it got a 78%, but for what Rotten Tomatoes is worth. But the negative reviews are like, yeah, this is weird. And I think I know why. I think, like, say you have a scene in which a college professor who's black suspects that racism is playing a part of her not getting tenure, right? But then you've also got the supernatural element that's undermining her. Well, which is it? Is it racism? Is it the supernatural element? Is it the supernatural element pushing the racism somehow? Then it's really the supernatural element. So, without kind of the clarity there, what would, I think if you wrote this movie in the 80s, probably the way, and I think it would be an okay concept if you did it right. But you have to, I think, present things that are relatively truthful, especially in comedy and horror, because you need that sort of baseline that everybody agrees with. Now, it's more important in comedy, but for horror, it's kind of important. Comedy and horror are kind of close. So we have to agree on what, slavery was to a New England college. The people engaged in that enterprise, the enterprise is bad. Let me state that for the record. In 2022, we have to state that for some reason. Yeah, I'm not a fan of slavery. Don't like it. Think it's bad. Okay. Are we clear now? Are we clear on that? Don't like racism. Don't like slavery. Okay. Now can I discuss things before you wokies get up in my comments? So that being said, what was slavery? Did people just capture people of other races because they hated them so much they wanted to make their lives miserable. No. What they wanted was free labor. And then they would retroactively justify it however they did, either through the Bible or through the laws at the time, or the fact that they just had money. Now, were they good people for doing that? No, they were hypocrites. They were total B-words for doing that. It's awful. But that was the time, and you had an opportunity in a horror movie, especially with ghosts. People of the past had different attitudes and cultures or whatever, and you can use that and exacerbate that in the ghost, and some spirits are bitter and evil, and you can use that to make that work, unless you're coming from a different perspective, and your perspective is, well, there's inherent racism in all white people, therefore, like, see, that's what this trailer feels like. It feels like, well, right? No, I don't know, because you're creating this world and presenting it to me. So you have to present me a world that is real, not the imaginary world of, well, everybody's so incredibly racist that we can't see it, but it's all bubbling under the surface, No, that's not true. So that's what this feels like. It feels like that they're starting from the wrong point. They should have started, at 25 feet. Instead, they're starting 75 feet in the wrong direction, trying to come back to an endpoint that makes sense, and they can't do it because they've started from the wrong premise. Or like, I always say that screenplays, that's kind of cool. I like the cool painting in this scene. Screenplays are like building a house, and you start with a foundation. Reality is part of that foundation. If you're not starting with reality, if you're starting with the premise, well, everybody's a racist who's white, you're already starting with a faulty premise that no one can get behind other than, people who are delusional. So you can't make a sensible horror movie out of that. Right? You're making it would be like making a movie, let's say, during the days of the Wild West, if they had movies, which they didn't. Back in the Wild West, some people believed that speeds over 20 miles an hour would kill you. Okay, so you make a movie in which people rob a train, and at some point the conductor is in a fight with the bad guy at the end, and he turns the train up to 20 miles an hour to kill the villain, and then slows it back down at the last second and saves the day. Sound like a good movie? No, of course not, because 20 miles an hour doesn't kill people. So you can't start with a faulty premise about the world. It just doesn't work. Just doesn't work. And it sounds like, from the reviews I read on Rotten Tomatoes, like that's what this is. Even now, and keep in mind, some of the people who reviewed this movie and didn't like it are totally woke. They acknowledge in their criticism that systematic racism exists, but this movie, it's because the racism undermines the supernatural, and the supernatural undermines the racism. So you can't really get a clear message out. Now, is it possible to make that work? Yeah. I mean, I think Lovecraft Country was a really good concept. Could have worked great. But if you're going to start with the premise that, it's just everybody is just out to get every black person who's ever lived, it's not gonna work. They could have made this movie in the 80s, and I'll tell you exactly how it would have opened. It would have opened with a guy getting killed in some sort of racist way, and one of the white college students being blamed for it, right? And he would have looked guilty in the beginning, but then the main character does some digging and realizes that he couldn't possibly be the killer. And then, he starts to uncover, he or she starts to uncover that there's some sort of supernatural entity doing this. And then somehow that guy dies anyway, and, nobody can figure out, and nobody believes this person. And over the course of the movie, you would uncover that, no, it's not a racist incident. It's actually these supernatural ghosts who lived at a time with a lot of racism, and they're ghosts and they're incredibly racist, and that's why people are dying. So that would make sense, but you would need to have that scene in which, you know, the one kid who happened to be white was totally innocent. You could do that in the 80s. I don't know if you could do that now. I don't know if people would get behind it. I don't think people in Hollywood would. Although I do think this movie probably got greenlit because Hollywood's so salivating over these concepts, because it is kind of woke. It's a kind of a woke concept. It's kind of like a CRT thing, that you could have pretty much done anything, right? You could have done a really good supernatural horror that ties into slavery, or slave times, whatever you want to call it. And you could have done a really good story and ignored most of the woke crap. Instead, it sounds like this is a lecture. It sounds that way from the critics. And I couldn't even do the act breakdown in this because it's just not enough here. I mean, and some of the critics said there's 3 different stories going on here. So do you have 3 acts and 3 stories? Well, that doesn't sound good. It's not the way you make a movie. What is this, a TV show? No, it should be Act 1. The college people go back to school, and there's this new student on campus, and she should probably be the focus of the story. Act 2, the ghost is haunting her, and she tries to tell the faculty members, but nobody believes her. But then things get weirder and weirder. People start dying. You know, they're trying to uncover the ghost. They're trying to figure out who the ghost is and why it's doing what it's doing, how to stop it. And by the 3rd act, they're all fighting the ghost. And in the 3rd act, they become victorious or everybody dies. And it's all a metaphor for racism, not beat you over the head racism. That's no way to sell it. Because it's a lecture, I don't think, or it seems to be a lecture, who the heck's going to see it? It's going to be too pretentious, in my view. I mean, you're going to have a scene in which she defends herself from people, and again, is it racism? Or is it the supernatural being? Both of them undermine each other. It's got to be clear, in my view. So, anyhow, Hollywood, again, you know, it's not known for nuance. When a trend hits, Hollywood gobbles it up and just says, yes, 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 please. More of the trend, more of the trend, more of the trend, more of the trend. I promise you, when this trend ends, they will have dozens of these movies in various stages of production that'll get halted, and they'll either get shelved, or they won't get finished, or the money will just dry up immediately and they'll be on to the next thing, whatever that is. This is a trend. The wokeness is a trend. And trends die. And when they die hard. And that's why you shouldn't follow the trends. You should make your own way. If you want to have your own voice, the quickest way not to do it is to follow this trend, screenwriters. I know there are ways to get it greenlit, but getting stuff greenlit versus your voice are 2 different things. Yes, you could pitch this. You could pitch this and get it greenlit and get the money and then move it forward. But the moment it's greenlit, that's when you got to go, okay, we got the money. We could do whatever we want now. Not like, oh, let's do more of it. You don't need to do more of it. You got the movie greenlit. Hollywood is greenlighting movies like this left, right, center. So, if you've got a pitch like this, make the most of it. Don't lecture people. Do an entertaining movie. Yes, you could put in messages, but they should be subtle. It should be a metaphor, not a club. Anyhow, that's my rant. So Master opens March 18th in select theaters, probably Art House, and on Prime Video. Will I see it? Probably not. I mean, I'd have to hear more about it. I could see it for free, so maybe I'll watch it and review it, depending on the reaction here. I don't know, every time I review a woke movie, people get bent out of shape and start yelling at me in the comments. Maybe I'll review it, maybe I won't. I don't care. I don't care. I'm just telling you what the trailer is. I didn't see the movie. I just saw the trailer. I watched the trailer, and then I click through it because YouTube flags me every time I watch a trailer and play it. So anyhow, that's it for me, Tony D. Check us out on Bitchute, Odysee, and Rumble for our more bass takes. If you couldn't take this one, don't go to there. Don't go over there. If you can't, if you're already screaming at me in here, in YouTube, yeah, don't go to Odysee, Bitchute, and Rumble. That's not for you. That'd be too much. That'd be too based. We'll see you in the next one.